5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, for holding this meeting. I'd like to start by thanking my co-chair from California, Doris Matsui. We've worked on the Spectrum Caucus together. It seems like every meeting we have here, we talk about Spectrum, but it's so important. And I just want to point out in the Ray Baum Act, there was also just nuances of technology policies. Amazing. We had actually put in there the Spectrum Auction Deposits Act, just so they could deposit bank deposits for selling of Spectrum. That was asked for by Chairman Pai. And the Chairwoman was great to work with us and have this in the mark so that we can move forward, and appreciate you doing that. I'm also pleased with the Commission's work on mid-band, licensed and unlicensed bands that can help us keep the U.S. on the cutting edge of 5G rather than letting China or any other person try to beat us to that. So, Mr. Forte, and actually, Mr. Aiken, I might ask you to comment. The question for Mr. Forte, but if you would comment. Starting with the Spectrum question, I know that you're trying to provide service for unserved areas by using fixed wireless technology, and you say in your testimony that you need access to more Spectrum in order to accomplish that. Charter is doing similar things in Kentucky. So thanks for your efforts, and for Mr. Forte and Mr. Aiken, how much Spectrum do you think is needed for fixed wireless, and what will be the results for consumers, and what can we do on this front? What more can we do on this front? Start with Mr. Forte and then Mr. Aiken.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, access to more Spectrum, most importantly, the type of Spectrum that works best for our customers and our people in rural areas. We need to make sure that the Spectrum that is offered, provides interference, protection out there. I know the C-band has been talked a little bit about today, but we are, of course, an existing cable television provider, and we use that C-band to provide television service to tens of thousands of customers across all the states that we serve, and that's the only option that we have. So if we were to look at that band for fixed wireless, we need to make sure that that is also protected. And one of the bands that isn't being used as much in our area is the 2.5, the educational broadband. And one of the reasons we really like that spectrum is because it's able to go penetrate dense forests, tree lines, things like that, and get through those obstacles. And obviously, it does have a certain educational benefit. I mean, I live in a very rural area. My kids go to a school out in the country 5 miles from my house, and I'm amazed even at their young age how much work that is destined on having that good, reliable internet connection. So yeah, I think we need more Spectrum in all these areas to accomplish the project, accomplish it, but let's make sure it works for everybody.
Thank you. Mr. Aiken?
Thanks for the question, Congressman. Yeah, I would echo what Mr. Forte said. We're looking at a lot of mid-band spectrum, so the same sort of spectrum bands that Mr. Forte mentioned, the EBS spectrum at 2.5 gigahertz, the 3.5 gigahertz spectrum, the CBRS band, which the FCC is currently considering, as well as the 3.7 to 4.2. Spectrum band. That mid-band spectrum has great characteristics to be able to go a long ways and carry a significant amount of bandwidth, which is perfect for radios that have to go many miles to houses in rural America.
Thanks. Another concern, and I have a district that could be a little bit of, Bob Latta just said his is flat as a table, some of the best farmland in the country, and I have some that doesn't have the mountains quite that my friend from Oregon has, but beautiful mountains and lakes. And a Mammoth Cave, anybody wants to visit, is there as well. So it's a beautiful place, but it is rural and also is suburban and urban. I live in Bowling Green, which is kind of a boom, tied in with the work our chairwoman's done in Middle Tennessee to make that area such a boom town. We're kind of tied in with that. I'm an hour from Nashville. And if you look at mapping, that's what I'm talking about. If you look at you would say Bowling Green is covered with broadband. And we have some friends from mine here from Connected Nation, who's a local hometown group who does the mapping. But it depends on where you live. Even I have very rural counties that is exactly what we're talking about, but even where I live. And some people won't develop, they can't move forward because people don't want to buy a home that doesn't have broadband access moving forward. So just in mapping, getting more specific in mapping, I think we were talking about, it's just too broad to say that one county is covered or not. So my question is for the panel, and I didn't leave you much time, but what recommendations do you have to improve the granularity and accuracy of the data collected? And what recommendations do you have to improve it? And should NTIA coordinate with the commission, or there are other ideas by giving it to NTIA solely? Anybody? I only got a few seconds, so one of you want to hit that? Just making mapping better.
Yeah, certainly I would start with ensuring that the information is up to date. We've recognized that given the advances in the satellite industry, the fact that we do provide 25/3 coverage is not included in the current map. And one other technology that I would acknowledge that I think will be useful in terms of the broadband mapping is technology that's being deployed that allows for RF mapping from space. And ultimately, I would recommend that company's technology, they're launching their first 3 satellites this year, be considered to be able to identify where there is actually a signal rather than just identification of hopes that there is a signal.
Thank you. And we're out of time. I yield back.
Ms. Matsui, your
5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for holding this meeting, and thank you all for being here. This first one's for Commissioner Olhausen. Last Congress introduced, it was H.R. 5315, which is the CLEAR Act, which we had part of a series of bills that we put forward on commission process reform. And I think it was almost a year ago that the commission announced itself that it was going to announce a set of reforms for consumer protection investigations, and was reportedly looking to reforms for competitive investigations as well. Has there been progress made?
So, yes, there has been progress that's been made. So we had our civil investigative demand reforms that I talked about at the beginning of my testimony that tried to give recipients clearer information and better guidance. We also reduced the time for civil investigative demand, gave a little more time to respond. We've gone through, under my leadership, and we closed a number of investigations. But one of the other things that we did is we went through and looked at all our data security investigations, and privacy, the ones that we closed, and we distilled from that lessons about what steps companies had taken where we found it gave reasonable security. And we issued that in an updated guidance called Stick with Security. It gave us 10 additional lessons to supplement our Start with Security brochure.
Okay. Well, thank you. And Mr. Chairman, do you have any comments on issues the committee should be considering in just terms of process reform as well?
Of process, also on the competition side. So one of the things that's been reported publicly is that the merger investigations seem to have gotten longer, at least according to some measures. So one of the things we're looking at is actually developing a tracking mechanism to see how long they are in fact taking and why they are taking as long as they are, and then allow us to determine what we can do to make them more efficient and less burdensome.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to shift gears to the chairman as well. I know that we have, particularly with older folks, we've advertised and talked. I mean, our office has tried to put out, when somebody calls you, never give any information over the phone. Hey, we're your bank. We need to fix your account or whatever. We do that. But the concern that I have is these fake websites when you go online and you're seeking the information, and you're trying to engage with a hotel chain or to get a reservation or whatever, and you got to give information to confirm rental car, any of that, though, any consumer, actually, retail business. So just interested in how we know the identity of a website. One, is the committee, I know the committee is looking at how websites or identities confirmed. And the question is, what tools can consumers use to confirm they own a real website where they intended to go instead of a phishing site? And is the green, I think it's the green padlock that should be next to the site, is that secure? Is that something we should look for? Or any of y'all want to, anybody that's in that area, look for that? Talk about that. Is there any, talking about secure websites, is none of that here? Okay, I guess that's not a question.
Congressman, if I may just very briefly, you had asked about other process reforms. I think I would be remiss not to bring up the Sunshine Act. While that law has a really great name, the way it operates today, it inhibits our ability as a commission to talk to each other. And so I just forward that for your consideration.
And how's that detrimental?
Well,
I'm not challenged. I'm asking if you to.
Sure.
An example of you would like to talk with each other.
If 3 of us want to talk together about an important issue, or 4 of us want to talk together, unless we, of commission business, unless we publicly notice it in advance, we can't meet. And while there are some really important meetings that take place that are noticed, the daily back and forth can also be important.
Yeah, the ability to informally meet without having to, in advance, schedule a full commission meeting would be enormously helpful.
Okay, so
it allows us to kind of work through issues much more quickly and without delay, as opposed to actually scheduling a formal meeting.
So the idea was, if you're going to take any action, then it would be noticed, but you can't even
We'd have to vote. We'd have to vote.
Okay, any action moving forward, let's see that.
To be clear, we're talking about informal conversations.
understand what
To
you're
take
saying.
any legal action, yeah, of course.
Yeah, you can't, I've seen city commissions over in a room or something, they say, oh, we got one commissioner, need to step out of the room to talk about something.
Happens.
And that's what, so there only can be two instead of three. When I'm talking to them about different business, I've seen that before. And they literally do that. They don't take advantage. They send somebody out of the room so they don't have the quorum or something moving forward. But it does seem like, can we not just talk about what issues are important to the city that's not an action that's being taken and moving forward? I see your point to that. Yield back.
Thank you very much. The gentleman yields back the balance of his time, and the chair now recognizes the gentlelady from New York.